Welcome to the Texas Oil and Gas Podcast, the show dedicated to bring you the news from the oil patch deep in the heart of Texas, with your host, Ryan Ray and Josh Shelton.
We're back with the Texas Oil and Gas Podcast. We appreciate you tuning in to today's episode. This is episode 197. 3 episodes away from our 200th episode, Ryan. It's been an interesting week this week. How are things going on your end?
Well, they're pretty lovely. We picked up another 5-star review. We picked up another 1-star review. Who's giving us 1-star reviews? Like, seriously, who is wasting their time? Give us a 5-star review and roast us. That's the beauty of it. Don't be a coward and drop the 1-star and go away. We want to hear it. We want to hear from you about your COVID nonsense, or why you're upset we talked about not wearing masks, or why we don't buy into the latest hysteria. Please go ahead and do 5 stars and do that. Okay, here it is. This is from VW99. Top notch. I started listening to this podcast a year ago during the negative price crisis. Too soon to bring it up. Too soon. Learning about energy industry from this. I live in Ohio and don't work in oil and gas, but this gives a good perspective on the ground reality and the right mix of information and comedy. Thank you for that, W99, VW99. But yeah, let's not talk about those negative prices just quite yet. It's a little salt in the wound there. A lot of salt in the wound, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah, so what's that leave us now, Ryan? 97 more to
400. Yeah. 400. Yeah, working on 400. So we are 97 more to 400, and
nearly there.
Nah, listen, with our listener base, we could have that by next show if they wanted to. I'm not saying there's pressure. I'm just saying if they really wanted to, they could get that done. We're looking at look at the, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, the baby's back there crying now. You're talking about the show right now, Josh. We're like top 30, it looks like, in the business news category. We're heavyweights, man. We're the real deal Holyfield. And so, I don't want to say we've earned the 5 stars, but, you listeners have earned the right to give us a 5-star review. That's how it is, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Like, together we have grown the show. Josh's phone's pinging and my baby's crying. That's why we need 5 stars. It's like, y'all don't know what's going on behind the scenes here, people. It's craziness. Kids running around, phones going off. Wake up every day hoping for a 5-star review.
Well, Ryan, I am waking up every day hoping that Aramco just keeps these cuts off the market. Keep these barrels off the market. They're supposed to be meeting here pretty soon, and this is going to be the moment. I think there's a report that came out here the 22nd, which is today, that they reported a net profit of $49 billion for 2020, down 44% on the year, but still a positive year. So they're down 44%.
It's a bad day at the office.
So here's a question: Is that going to incentivize them to start doing a little bit more? Is that report? I mean, surely they already knew all this before this report came out. We're learning about it, but they knew. So I don't think this report necessarily is going to indicate a change of heart, but I'm wondering if a look into what's going on, if we can expect them to put some more barrels on the market here pretty soon.
Yeah, so let me see here. I wanted to see here. Well, I wanted to find this article and I can't find it now. But it talked about the physical. Yeah, here it is. This is from Bloomberg on the 18th. Physical oil market. Communist. Physical oil markets weakens with China buyers on the sidelines. The market for physical crude barrels in Asia is showing signs of weakness, with muted buying from some in China, leading to ample supply. So you have that the Chinese buying. I think we talked about this someone here. Have has kind of slowed down. Now there is some maintenance going on as part of it. And I'm trying to see Big Warren, who you should follow on Twitter if you want to follow oil and gas stuff. Has some tweets about that this morning. Let's see here. What is he saying? He says, weakness of the physical market. Equinor showed loading 1-2 million plants. Pre-COVID. One more. Where's it at? Excuse the physical market is weak because of refinery maintenance in China in April, May is just silly. The physical market is weak for cargoes loading March, April, May. Those cargoes will be processed in China in June, July, August after maintenance. This is not a weakness due to maintenance. So, there's a lot of talk out here. And he goes on to say, someone to ask him, do you think that reflects an actual demand shortage or pressure on oil prices due to inventory for cheaper 2020 oil? And he says, I think it is because China can use storage if they need to, but Chinese margins are also very poor at the moment. So, when you look at this, we talk about the prices going up. What are the Saudis going to do? The Saudis, if I were them, and I put this out there about a month ago, I would do everything I could to keep the prices from going to 70. I don't have the data that they have. So for me, that would have meant putting the barrels on the market to keep the price going up. Well, guess what? They didn't put the price on the market, and the price they didn't put the barrels on the market, and the price didn't go up. So they made the right call, right? So they don't want the price, I don't think, getting above 70 and then kind of going hog wild with the U.S. producers looking to drill. So I think we got to tip our caps to the Saudis. They played this right. It seems like the prices are not out of control. They haven't put too much, because if they would have put that $1 million, I can't speak today, those 1 million barrels a day on the market you talked about, well, prices would be going down, right? So they've really played it right. So their margins, I know they didn't make as much, they're losing money and all that stuff. That's part of the game, and so it looks like they're playing it right from my perspective right now, at least. You're muted.
Sorry, I was. So what you would say then is that your guess or your insight on what the reason why they did not put those barrels on the market is that they still see a lower demand / too much supply still there, and so not putting those barrels on the market will prevent the price from getting pushed down. Because when they put the barrels on the market, they're thinking that there's going to be a sharp decline in the price.
So my view on the Saudis was very simplistic. Listen, there's people with refineries and all kinds of stuff that may disagree, whatever. But I just said, imagine that we're selling hamburgers, and there's a hamburger stock exchange, and I told you I was going to put 1 million less hamburgers on the market during this time period. You'd say, why? And I could say, well, I don't have the work, the resource, the beef. I can't get them out. There's a reason that's preventing me from doing it. Or I could say, I don't think there's going to be 1 million hamburgers to be bought. So I do 10 million hamburgers in January. I'm going to do 9 in February because I don't think there's going to be that many hamburgers sold. That was how I read what the Saudis were doing, was that they didn't think that the oil demand was going to be up that quick. And so they were taking the 1 million off. And then you look at what they did again. I was surprised they did it again because I thought maybe the demand was picking back up. Well, they didn't do it. Well, guess what? They're not doing this, has put the prices higher, but it hasn't sent them out. It's not like the prices are going crazy. So whatever, even my simple analogy doesn't work. Whatever they're doing is not sending the prices to the roof. And so they're playing it right. I think we all thought that they were going to put these barrels, if they took these barrels off, that you would see something to where, the price might get really high, and it hasn't. So I think demand is just fundamentally weaker than most people want to admit. We've had 3 weeks of storage increase now, something like that. I know we set a record 4 weeks ago, and then we did like half that amount the next week. So we'll see. Demand, I think, has to pick up next few months, assuming there's not new lockdowns, which there's reports of new lockdowns. I don't know if you've seen some of that stuff for the weekend, but there's I know that Germany, I think it is, Switzerland, London, I think those are 3 places. And of course in Miami, I'm not really sure what's going on in Miami, but it looks like they're trying to party down there and the folks ain't having it. So but it's spring break season, right? You got holiday travel season coming up. So will we allow people to get out and about, travel the country, travel the world for summer, do these things? That will be a big boon for demand, and I don't know. So we shall see.
Well, yeah, that is a good question. I didn't see anything about the lockdowns. In Texas, it seems like everything's been going back to normal, as much as you would expect, and the way the times are right now. But so I didn't hear about the stuff in Miami. I did see there was some news about Miami coming out, but I didn't actually follow it. So they're not letting people go to the beach, or what are they doing?
Yeah, I just caught it last night, and apparently they instituted a curfew. So I don't know if they have some kind of like capacity restrictions or whatever, and they were blowing through that. I don't know, but they instituted a curfew to kind of curtail whatever was going on down there. And I guess it's spring break, people down there partying and stuff, and so
Curfew.
Yeah.
My goodness.
Yeah, well, we got to have our hand held by, Daddy Fauci, or we're going to be in trouble.
You see how that's going to work. I bet they're going to put Panama out of business, or people are going to say, screw it, just keep doing what they want to do. All right, so we have another article here. Can Venezuela's oil industry come back from the dead? This is kind of like the International Day, Brian. There wasn't a lot of news out of the Permian this week, so I'm just looking at some of the factors that are going to play a big part potentially in oil price for the next, say, month or two. So looking at Saudi Aramco, and then I saw this article, and I don't necessarily think this is. I'm not optimistic that Venezuela is going to come back on the market, but if they did, it could be a pretty big deal. The oil price, and especially where we're at right now.
Yeah, it's funny because if you look at what their production was, a few years ago, it was 2 something million barrels a day. Now it's like 500,000 barrels a day, something like that. It's dropped off pretty significant. And the thing for Venezuela or Nigeria or Mexico or these countries that are seeding barrels because of no real reason. So Nigeria has a ton of theft. Mexico has a ton of theft. Venezuela has all kinds of problems. So they're seeding barrels to the market that they shouldn't be seeding, right? They should have their production at whatever it is, 2 million barrels a day, or whatever it should be. They shouldn't be losing this much because their country is so poorly ran. And what's happening is it's not like those barrels are causing the price to go through the roof, right?
Yep.
So if you look at Venezuela, the decline of their industry has not kept prices at $100 a barrel. Someone else has just picked those barrels up for them. So how do they get back to the market? That's the question. So if they said tomorrow they fix up the problems, and they wanted to put 2 million barrels a day again on the market, so a 1.5 million barrel increase roughly. Okay, well, what's that going to do to the prices? Well, that's going to really hurt the prices. So how do they get back? I don't know. That's a tough question. I do think they will eventually come back. I don't. There's no reason to believe that they're gone forever. But I think some of these countries have really kind of missed the boat here, especially like a Nigeria, like a Mexico. In Venezuela, they lose so much to theft and to mismanagement, and the market is just picking those barrels up, and they're losing it. Now, the theft stuff's a little bit more complicated than that, but the other thing to follow here is Venezuela's ties with China, and I know that the petrodollar the demise of the petrodollar has been predicted for quite some time. I do think, though, we are entering into the next few years will be the biggest push on the dollar as a reserve currency that in our lifetime, and since the dollar has been a reserve currency since 1944, it probably be the biggest stress because China's digital yuan, their Belt and Road Initiative, all the things they have going on will put pressure on the dollar as a reserve currency. And so, will China eventually say to someone like Venezuela, listen, you guys, it's the dollar's causing you guys business to really struggle. Why don't we go to the digital yuan? We can do transactions there. So I think you have a lot of stuff like that could really change the balance of power. I don't think China's ready to make that step today, but possibly in the future.
Yeah. So, it's going to be interesting to see. I do see that China is increasing some of their imports, but I've always wondered about when Venezuela was going to come back because, the oil isn't really going anywhere. It's there, so there's an opportunity. I wonder if maybe they will partner with other nations or partner with other people that can come in and maybe do it at a better, more efficient manner.
Here's the greatest. I know our guest in the backstage there. So the greatest way to create wealth across the world right now would be to transfer ownership of minerals to private citizens. Like, you want to talk about income inequality, talk about income disparity, all this stuff. If you transferred in all these emerging markets, you transferred the minerals from the government to the people, that would be the greatest single shift of wealth in mankind's history, from the elite to the working class people. Now, when I say that, I understand that if you did that, you probably have all kinds of mass murders because people would be going after landowners with minerals. So you have to do a little bit more strategically. But fundamentally, if you really want to generate wealth across the globe, you just do that today. You start figuring that out, because if you did that, then all of a sudden all these incentives and all this stuff would change, and you would have the single largest shift of wealth from the top to the lower class by just simply transferring the minerals. It won't happen because politicians are corrupt. So anyways, I know we got our guest. Let's bring him on now. Can you hear us, sir?
I can.
Let me put you up here on the big screen. Get me and Josh over here on the side view. All right, there we go. All right, well, why don't you give everyone a quick introduction of who you are and who you are with?
Sure. Well, my name is Jesson Bradshaw, and I'm the CEO here at Energy Ogre. And we're in the business of helping folks in the competitive market areas make good decisions and handle their electricity purchasing process for them to try to make everything as simple as possible. I guess that's a Reader's Digest version.
There you go. So, Josh, did you book this? Because so I don't know if you know, my nickname is Shrek, and so I've been called an ogre last time. So I don't know if Josh put you up to this, or this is conspiracy against me. I feel like something may be going on here a little bit more nefarious.
Perhaps.
Okay, so Energy Ogre. Just curious. That's let's see if I can get this to work. Yeah, there we go. That's a good looking name there. So where did that come from?
It's interesting. We have some super creative people here, and we ran a competition, some brainstorming ideas, and we came up with 5 or 6 different things. Our idea here was, here we are all these years post the competitive market, and there are a lot of people that are still confused about how all this works. And we wanted to come up with a name that was and a logo that was identifiable as being something different than an energy provider. And something that just kind of stuck, and we've really embraced it. So we all love it, and it's been a lot of fun.
Well, obviously, electricity has been on everyone's mind, especially with the recent storms. So how did you guys kind of see what happened? How did you kind of advise people on how to handle that? Maybe some reaction to the fallout, and how should people look at things moving forward?
Sure. For us and our customers, we only place customers in fixed rate contracts in the competitive areas. So the impacts for the members that we serve really didn't have as much to do with any exposure to commodity price increases. It was really a function of how much more energy they might have been using. So that's the primary, but there was so much disinformation and so much fear, I think, that was out in the marketplace, especially around folks who were posting like on Facebook or other kinds of social media things like their gritty bill that, rightly caused people a lot of anxiety of like, am I going to get hit with an $18,000 or $17,000 electricity bill? So there was a lot of concern about that. We also wanted to see, how this played out in terms of, this is a very large financial disruption for a lot of the participants in the marketplace. And so we wanted to see what ended up happening from, what folks would end up falling out, who's going to end up moving, some of their customers to the provider of last resort via some kind of a default. And so, as it turns out, the effects of that were relative in the competitive market were pretty mild. In terms of the rest of it, I've been in the power business since 1995, and that's when it deregulated at the wholesale level. And I've, run and built power generation facilities and been involved with regulated utility delivery companies. And it was an interesting look at how all these things came out. And I think more than anything, I think a lot of disinformation has continued, or things that seem to be intuitively appealing as good solutions. They're not things are not quite as simple to fix as we want them to be.
So one of the things that we've been looking at with the electricity was you mentioned some incentives that what would be the best way for a place like Texas to try to prevent what we had last time? So that right now there's been a lot of incentives toward wind and solar. Should there be more incentives for something like coal? Because there's a question of profitability, because these plants, they cost a lot of money, and these companies, the only way they could ensure profitability would be with some of these incentives. Do you think that would have been the better approach, or do you think maybe winterizing the things we already have in place, the wind turbines, we saw those freeze? Would it have been better to have invested in winterizing these structures and turbines and pipelines and so what was y'all's take on what the best approach is to prevent it?
Well, I think the first thing you have to start with is what's the acceptable scenarios that you're willing to live with? Like, what do you build towards? Are we building towards a 1 in a 200-year type event? Like, how much resiliency are we willing to pay for collectively to make sure that we have consistent, uninterrupted electricity supply costs? And so I think that's one of the things that gets missed a lot. Like, we talk about that, how do we prevent this from happening? And can it be done? Absolutely. You can reduce those probabilities to very, very, very small, percentages, but the cost associated with that may be astronomically large. And that's oftentimes, I think, one of the things that gets missing in some of this. Now, with respect to winterization, that gets back into this cost benefit analysis, looking through some of the records, and I don't have them all kind of in front of me, but I know that, like in Oklahoma City, those guys hit, low temperatures they haven't seen since the late 1800s. And I think down here in Houston, some of the temperatures that we saw were like breaking 140-year-old records. So it's a very anomalous weather type scenario. And I think when folks are building these power facilities, they're not really thinking through these 1 in 150-year type scenarios. I can tell you that if you look through the list of the public disclosures that have been made, a lot of these companies that have been building renewable, wind in particular, those guys took gargantuan losses. One of the companies I was reading about, estimated they would lose $250 million because when they sell their output and it doesn't show up, they got to buy it back at those real-time prices. And so all that investment, one way or the other, whether it's mandated or otherwise, now that it's been proven to be a risk for these companies, I really would be shocked if they didn't undertake the process themselves to make sure they never get caught in that situation again, because for the vast majority of them is extremely costly for them to not be able to produce during those periods of time. Beyond that, in terms of what's the right mix, one of the things that we don't talk about very much, and it's because technologically we haven't kind of gotten there yet, but we have been buying and distributing and consuming, or producing, distributing, and consuming electricity pretty much the same way for the last 100 years. We don't make any massive adjustments on the back end. People don't have a good way to manage how much demand that they're actually using. There's a huge opportunity for us to not only increase supply, but figure out how to selectively reduce demand. And when we say that, we tend to think about that as it's 100%, you're either out or you're not out. And there's different gradients of the kinds of demands of what we should be reducing. Like, can you take your dishwasher offline? Can you take your clothes washer offline? Can you take your pool pumps offline? Can you keep it to electricity required for home heating and those types of things, where there's a prioritization of the demand of how you do that? And I think that technology is going to make its way into the equation and will be a very powerful part of this. If you think about it, it's one of the few places where, in every other thing that we buy and sell, there's a kind of a price elasticity of demand. The more expensive it gets, the less of it we want to use. But usually you can't see what it's costing you in real time. And sometimes because of the way you're buying your electricity, you can't tell what it's going to cost you in the long run as well. So I think there's ample room for some technological expansion into that space to really handle some of the demand management. Your other question about baseload, it's a very interesting question about some of these different types of facilities. And really, if you look at the coal universe here, the last coal plant that I'm aware of that was built in 2013 in North Texas. And, there's a lot of reasons why, that may be one of the last ones we see for a while. And it's not just because of the environmental consequences associated with it. It's just, in the end, coal has a hard time today competing with natural gas fired generation on economics alone. Coal plants tend to have much poor operational flexibility. So if you want to get a coal plant on when it's been offline, it might take a couple of days to get it up and running. And then it has to operate within, certain operational parameters that give it a little bit less flexibility that you might get out of a combined cycle natural gas facility. So back in the days, when we were thinking about this in, let's say, the late 90s, early 2000s, when natural gas was in the $5 to $7 to $9 in MMBTU range, coal is very competitive with gas. But in today's commodity environment, depending upon what happens off in the future, natural gas is going to beat it on a hands down basis every time.
So you mentioned kind of the power distribution on demand. I'm a little bit of a Star Trek nerd. So I remember watching Star Trek The Next Generation. They'd be like, okay, shift the power to the shields or shift it to the phasers or shift it. I'm like, oh, man, that's really cool. Of course, nothing we have that I own, at least, you can do that. I can push the gas pedal a little harder at my F-250, or I can turn the AC down, but that's kind of a universal metric. To get to something like that, we'd have to have a very integrated system in our home. So you say this technology is kind of coming. How far are we before our dishwashers and our washing machines and our fridge and ice makers, like all that could be on the iPad where you could really adjust that? Is that like 5 years out, 10 years out, 20 years out? Is it here today and I'm just backward?
I think that all those parts and pieces already exist. It's just how you organize them and put them together. And I think that you'll be able to see some of this stuff within the next 5 years. And it may very well be something that what I think is likely to occur is that you're not going to want to be on your iPad figuring out what to stop and start. You're going to want something that can just figure it out for you. You're going to want to have a program that runs through and says, hey, it's really important to me that when I'm at home that I have the temperature within this range, and I'm way less concerned about whether the dishwasher runs, or let's not let that electric water heater move around when it needs to. And remember that these periods of scarcity are somewhat rare. We don't have a whole lot of these hours per year. And so this is why I think the demand response, the demand management aspect is going to be much more important as time goes on. And think about it this way: until we see a situation like we saw with wholesale prices for this length of time, the profit and motivation or the financial incentive to really invest heavily on demand management, demand response, it's not kind of there. Now it's very clear that there's a huge amount of value in investing in those types of solutions and technologies. And I think that's exactly what you're going to see. So the parts and pieces, we already have all different types of IoT-based technologies. There's definitely ways that people can understand what's happening in real-time wholesale pricing, and it's just a function of pulling all these parts together to form a commercially viable solution that we can roll out for consumers in Texas and really the rest of the country.
Yeah, I do think it's, you talk about the oil and gas debate right now with the flaring and the waste and all that stuff. I do think it's quite interesting to think about, because my bill, what's yours in the summer, Josh? Like $400 or $500, something like that, or your bill?
It's around $375
in the summer.
Mm-hmm.
I need to come move to your house. Mine's like $400. I don't know. Maybe I need that Shelton plan. But it would be nice to know. Okay, if we had, I agree, the algorithm would be better. Maybe just ask the algorithm. Hey, algorithm, I want my bill to be $250. What does that mean? And then the algorithm to tell me, hey, okay, you can't run these lights for this long. Like almost kind of force you into it, because there are two things. One, you're saving money. Two, you're saving scarce commodity, which is whether it's coal or nuclear, whatever. So I think we talk about the free market. We talk about being conservationists. This is a way where people like myself, who are free market proponents, can say, you know what, this is actually good. We're conserving energy. We're not wasting it, because right now I'm leaving the light on, not thinking about it. I'm just running my power bill up, so I'm saving money. I'm saving energy, and the market is helping me understand the best way to maximize my efficiency of my tools. So it's something that's a win-win that doesn't have to be forced upon us, whereas these rolling blackouts were forced upon us because we didn't have the technology to really look and say, okay, listen, if they'd have called us up and said, listen, Mr. Ray, you got to get your power down below 50% reduction. Okay, well, what does that mean? And what are my options here? I didn't even have that ability to work with the power provider to come to a reasonable conclusion. It was either all or none. And so I think that would be an interesting way to see the market work itself out.
Yeah, I think that's one of the more important lessons learned from what we saw before. Is I think there was a distinct the magnitude of the demand supply imbalance was so large that I think it caught a lot of the distribution providers off guard in terms of their plans for how they actually institute rolling blackouts. ERCOT does not tell each of these transmission distribution service providers what areas that they need to reduce load. They just tell them you got to reduce this amount of load. And what we saw here, and it may, I'm certainly no distribution expert on the way the service territory in Houston is set up through CenterPoint's system, but it did look like one of the problems that was happening is when they interrupted certain areas of load, like if you let a house get down to 20 degrees inside or 35 degrees because you've actually interrupted the power there for 8 hours as opposed to rotating through every 15 minutes. When you re-energize that house, it's going to try to go max up to get back to temperature. So I think what they found is, hey, we're going to reduce these 100,000 customers and bring these other 100,000 on. Well, the 100,000 that they brought on looked more like 150,000 because all the HVAC equipment was trying to recover these massive temperature losses. Whereas if we had done a better job of making sure that rotation was done on a very consistent, efficient basis, we would not have really suffered. I mean, I think no one really wants to have their power interrupted for a half an hour at a time, but I think most of us would have taken that versus, being stuck in the dark for, multiple days at a time, or having the interior temperatures drop down into, low double digits. It wasn't a good allocation of the way that all worked. And that's one of the things that I'd really like to see a lot of emphasis and effort placed upon if we do get into these situations again. And, electricity is kind of a weird thing that we're always on the knife's edge. It's just the nature of the beast, that we need to have a better program in place. We need to have some better processes in place to ensure we have a much more orderly process through rotation if we get into one of these situations again. Because what happened, I don't think was acceptable.
No, it definitely wasn't acceptable. And one of the things that we've talked about on the show is that the power companies, from my perspective, there's a lot of talk right now about regulator this and regulator that. The power company is not responsible to me, the consumer. And so I don't know how he fixed that. I don't want the power companies to be sued daily. But if there's some consumer advocate group, or if there's this politician here, or this group there, or whatever, that's all fine and dandy. But if they never actually responsible to the consumer, then we really have a hard time leveraging it. And so it's one of the things, I don't know how we get there, but I think it's very important. And if that's something as simple as, hey, if you want to buy from TXU, you have to use our smart grid technology to help us work with you for power demand, that would be a big step. I would be happy to have that because I could work with them in the summer, in the winter. And so that would kind of give me the flexibility if they said, hey, listen, you got to cut your power by 15%, 20%, 30%, whatever, or cut you off. Like that would be at least a step in the right direction. I don't know if we can get there, but so help me out here. Why Josh got a bigger house than me? Dude lives in a McMansion. Okay, he lives in like a big old house on the hill over there. Why is his bill cheaper than mine? What's going on with this?
Well, it depends. It depends on who your provider is and what your rate programs look like, and if you're into something that's optimized for the way you use electricity. That's one of the positive things. It's one of the things that I hear a lot in the wake of this is, well, it's these people always sort of pop their heads up, and of course, I'm talking my book because this is what I help people do on a day in and day out basis. But here, it's deregulation. We never had this back. Okay, that's not true. So it really has nothing to do with that. One of the nice things from a free market perspective is, the competitive market really allows for a lot of innovation. And we've seen that over and over and over again. Some of the innovations are bad, like the gritty type structures that we have been railing against for many, many years. No consumer has any business participating in the market of last resort for wholesale energy. And now I think we'll see some rulemaking around that, which I wish wasn't necessary, but probably is. But one of the things that's kind of nice is, if you're like, let's say you work shift and you were, constantly, up during nighttime, working from home or whatever have you, you can find a plan that's optimized for the way you use electricity. And that's one of the nice aspects of the way the competitive market has been, unfolding, is now we can start to get to really kind of customized solutions for each one of these residential consumers. So in your case, it may be a situation where you need to, maybe have someone like me help out, or, there's some free tools that are out there. We have some free tools on our website just to give you an idea. Am I in market or am I out of market? But yeah, I think that people get sort of surprised at how much more effective their costs can be just by taking full advantage of the competitive marketplace.
I suspect Josh is probably on one of those like solar nights and free days and weekends, and I see those crazy plans advertised all the time.
Some of those are gimmicks too. I mean, the more gimmicky, usually the more you pay. So be careful.
Yeah. So I spent about 3 or 4 hours researching it, trying to get one. I got a wholesale program that gets my costs way down. Since we have a big house, so we use a lot. So we got a cheap rate.
Well, then you just paid out the tooth for this last month if you don't have a fixed cost. What are you saying?
No, I mean, it was like 420, so it was higher than normal, but it's a fixed cost, but it's wholesale fixed cost, so I get it at a cheaper rate, but I have to use over a certain amount in order to qualify, which I use it every month. So,
and that's one of the things I think a lot of people get confused about when buying electricity is we like to think about buying electricity as kind of like every other purchasing experience we make. Like if you go to Costco, like you're like, I know I'm going to get a better deal on Cheerios if I go to Costco because I'm going to buy it in bulk. And you're like, I may not need all these Cheerios. I may be long and wrong Cheerios for 2 years, but it is what it is. I'm gonna go broke saving money or whatever it is that you want to do there. But electricity is totally opposite of that. It doesn't work that way at all. And I think a lot of people try to sell electricity at the retail level with some of these notions that are out there that are not right. So as you guys know, the way the electricity infrastructure works, we don't really have any ability to store any of it. And so what that results in is it is literally the ultimate just-in-time inventory commodity. So when someone says, well, we're buying it in bulk and we're passing those savings on to you, that's just not possible, because you can't buy more electricity than is actually being used and consumed right now. So that it's one of these weird aspects. It doesn't work like anything else that we buy. So a lot of times people might say, hey, well, you might think that if you were in a buying group or in some kind of a collective type of thing, that's going to give you more. And, generally speaking, I don't think that we've seen that to be the case. If that were the case, I think most of the aggregation projects that have been out there since the market opened would be, materially less expensive. And, we see consistently that members that are shopping, that we're shopping for on an individual basis will be those numbers all the time. And it's because people get lured in by some of these other notions of the way it works. It's just not the way it works.
Okay. Let's see here. One more question for you. You said wholesale is not for people like me, maybe for big spenders like Josh, but the average folk in Texas doesn't need to be on wholesale. Who is the wholesale market for, in your opinion?
So when we say the wholesale market, you really have to clarify what that means, because there's not one wholesale market. It's just like the way gas trades. If I want to buy and sell gas, or I want to buy and sell crude on a forward basis, I can buy and sell it through an exchange. That's a wholesale market. I can buy and sell through ICE. That's another wholesale market. I can buy and sell bilaterally, right, with other counterparties. I do it for next year, next month, next week. So those are all wholesale markets that happen in electricity in the term, just like they happen in all the other energy commodities. The wholesale market that people refer to, there's really two that are run by ERCOT that are kind of system-wide markets. One is a day-ahead market. That's a wholesale market. And then there's this other market that has always been there since we first opened. It's the oldest one. It was originally called the balancing energy market. And that balancing energy market, what it really was to take advantage, or to clear on a 15-minute basis the difference between what you thought everything was going to look like yesterday and what it's actually turning out to be today. So that's a wholesale market that by its very nature it's the wholesale market of last resort. It's the last place that people go. So I think that, again, sometimes when some of these guys were selling these wholesale indexed market plans, people think that wholesale means cheaper than retail, and without understanding that what that was the wholesale market of last resort. It's the last iteration. It's like buying and selling intraday gas, or trying to make a schedule adjustment to what's happening with your intraday stuff, that you can have big swings depending upon what's happening within that gas day. The exact same thing is true in electricity, but the volatility is far higher just because it's what it takes to clear that difference between what we thought it was yesterday and what it is in real time.
Okay, the website is energyogre.com. O-G-R-E is how you spell ogre. For those of you who spell like Josh, energyogre.com is the website. Mr. Bradshaw, anywhere else you want to point people to, or any final thoughts before we let you out of here today?
Well, I'm pleased because a lot of times when I talk to folks, I see the head hit the table. So I know that I bore people, but not so much that I put you guys both to sleep. I think versus anything, for most of the consumers in Texas, especially the ones that are in the competitive areas, that we can help, and that really the deregulation law, Senate Bill 7, as it came out way back when, was one of the largest value transfers back to consumers that I think we've ever seen, and we need to make sure that more people take advantage of that. A lot of people kind of fall asleep and they don't remember to get back. So these types of times, the silver lining to this is it usually wakes people back up to looking and doing some of the work like what Josh had said. I don't know that most people want to put 3 or 4 hours into doing the research on some of those things, but if you haven't changed your provider in a few years, you're more than likely overpaying. So take the time to do a little bit of research. Like I said, we've got some tools on our website to help you understand where you are relative to market. Power to Choose, the PUCT runs a website there. If folks want to peruse there, they don't want someone like me to help them. If they want to look at it themselves, it's a very good resource. Generally speaking, in every one of those offers, there's a little hyperlink there to a thing called an electricity fax label. And the electricity fax label is kind of like the DNA of how that rate program is. So if you click on that and you see the fax label has, it looks like the Death Star version where it's, it just goes on and on and on. The more complicated these things are, there's probably some gotchas in there. So find one that's very clean and succinct and simple to the point, and you're probably going to do better than 95% of consumers here in Texas.
Okay, and I will be calling up Josh this afternoon, because if you go to energyogre.com/check, we're going to be putting his numbers in. We're going to put my numbers in, and we're going to figure out what's going on here, because I'm a little frustrated that my man is overgetting me for $1.50 every month.
There you go.
Mansion, so it's a little frustrating. Okay, energyogre.com is the website. Mr. Bradshaw, thank you so much for coming on. Best of luck to you, and we'll get you on again in the future. I'm sure there will be some power, something that would be worth talking about.
Sure. Well, I'm happy to bore you at any time.
Event.
Happy to bore you whenever.
We enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Shelton. Let's see here. What we got left in the roundup today?
All right. Our guy, Carl Icahn.
My man, Carl.
To cut Oxy stake, remain on board of directors.
Gangster status, right?
Yes, sir.
Go in, slam the CEO, buy the stock, get on the board, sell some of your stock, stay on the board. Hey, come on.
Yeah. He's been playing this deal like a fiddle for about 2 years now.
Way up. I don't know if you looked at it or not. It's it's down since I bought it. I picked it up and it went down some. Freaking icon messed me up, I think, selling. But anyways, it's up to 27. So remember, a year ago today, it was at 969, Joshua. 961, not a year ago today. Right now, it's trading at 27.80.
Wow. So it's moving in the right direction. I thought they would make it.
Yeah. I would say that that 171.27% increase is the right direction year over year.
Yeah, that's a fantastic direction. So another article we have: Louisiana oil and gas industry in danger after President Biden cancels 80 million acre oil lease, which this is not necessarily new. This came out on the 15th. But I mentioned something. I know it's in Louisiana, but it may impact oil prices in a positive way for those out in Midland. But that we're seeing some similar things there as we saw in New Mexico. So for a lot of folks that listen to the show, that might not be the best news.
This might go back to just the Texas Oil and Gas podcast, because the BLM might come back into Mexico. It might just be only Texas Oil and Gas, because New Mexico might lose BLM, take Louisiana's offshore stuff. So obviously there's a lot of private stuff in Louisiana with the Haynesville, but it's crazy, man. Like, New Mexico, I know I haven't looked at the bills lately, but they were talking about putting some stuff through there. It's like, good night.
Yeah.
I mean, whew, your boy Biden. He's
putting the Thor hammer on him. We got two more. One, this one's not too much related, but I saw it and I thought, hey, I figured I would at least mention it. Odessa Midland ranked 1 and 2 in nation for auto loan refinancing.
Auto loan refinance. I didn't know there was such an industry.
I didn't either.
If there is one, that makes sense that oil and gas workers are getting in a pinch. I mean, think about it. So January last year, you're getting ready to start your year off like, I need that new F-250. You go get it and bang. So
bang, yeah. I mean, so they get in a bad spot. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what's going on.
I didn't even know you could refinance them, but it makes sense that's number 1 and 2. So tough time.
And then last but not least, Interior Department announces public forum on federal oil gas program.
Yeah, we'll link to this in the show notes. One of the listeners sent this over. So if you want to follow what's going on with that, be sure to check it out. I think it's, what day is that this week? Is that this week, Josh, or next week?
Let's see. I did look over it. Let's see. It is Thursday, March the 25th. So Thursday this week.
Yeah, it comes on Tuesday.
1 to 4.
It will be linked in the show notes. Just need to go ahead and click that if you want to follow along, because it's coming out. It's 2 days after this podcast airs. So, okay. Anything else, Mr. Shelton?
That's it.
I just coughed right there on the air for everyone. Just a little throat clear to get I was trying to mute it, but
I never won why we need 5 stars.
What happened? I moved my mouse down to click the mute. I hit click and just went on the mute button. So it was just a no man's land. And so there you go. You got a nice little throaty clear. Before I remind you, leave us a 5-star review. We'll be back next. No, you won't be back next week, Art. You're taking off.
Yeah.
Dude, what are you taking off for? It's March, man.
It's Easter. Easter Monday.
No, it's not.
It's not.
No.
You sure?
No, it's not. It's not.
I'm just making stuff up. I'm just making stuff up at this point. Oh, I'll be here Easter Monday, actually. I will be here on that one.
All right. We'll be back next week. Oh, boy.